Hello and welcome to the Digital Digest, your weekly breakfast of insights, tips and tricks and general information that will help anyone trying to move things forward in the digital world of accounting. This show is brought to you by digital disruptors who are pushing the boundaries in this digital accounting space, or at least trying to. I'm your host, Ryan Piercy, and I'm joined as ever by John Toon. And this is our last episode for 2024. We're actually going to take a break. We've been going continuously for over a year now, I think, every week. So we're going to take a little break over Christmas and we'll be coming back to you in the new year. So we thought, what's the best way of ending 2024? And we thought, lots has happened, but let's focus on what's coming. What are the trends? And it's said that John's recording has gone. John's dropped off. Well, isn't this a perfect way of finishing 2024? Is with John disappearing entirely from the live stream whilst we're recording. Let's see if we manage to jump back in. But he is having massive tech problems this morning. So anyway, as I was saying, we're going to look at what we think are the big events that will happen in 2025, and do some predictions. We've already been, we are going to be predicting the big tech news in 2025 in a future podcast episode. But let's John and I try and dive in and do some predictions for big events in the accounting sector. And John's back. He's managed to rejoin us. So I'm going to, straight off the back of that, John, say, look, I'll hand it over to you, mate. What do you think are going to be, or what's your number one prediction for a big trend in 2025 in the accounting space?
Well, that's a great question, Ryan. And given that I'm feeling very digitally disrupted this morning because my laptop clearly doesn't want to play ball, I'm hoping that I might get a new laptop for 2025. That's my big trend.
Number one.
So I mean, I think. I think we're gonna see more of the AI stuff. I mean, I think that's almost inevitable. I know that's a bit of a cop out as well, right? Because
it is, yeah.
Because we've been talking about AI for so bloody long. But I do genuinely think that we're going to see quite a lot of big things from people building more AI into their products. Particularly large language model stuff. And I think what we're going to start to see more of is a mixture of internal firm-wide sort of co-pilots or assistants, which are going to be used for research and for data. I think the likes of Tolly's and some of the other providers of data are already looking at what they can do from that side of things to provide that out to people and to practices, which I think is a great use of that technology. But I also think that we're going to start to see more client-facing kind of chatbots being implemented using large language models to try and automate more of the work. And again, we've touched on this before in terms of some of the very, very big firms are already starting to do this, particularly around sort of personal tax services. That seems to be the area, not just here in the UK, but also internationally, where people are trying to automate more of the data collection and the processing of data. So I think that's probably going to be where we're at. I guess my other big prediction might be around events. I wonder if what we're going to start to see is maybe got another busy year of calendar of events and stuff, but I wonder if we're going to start to see the fall of some events next year, in terms of like next year might be a bit too much in terms of having so many events so compacted in the front half of the year that we might see some changes there. Either some events might not survive, or they might have to pivot and move to a different time of year.
Yeah, I think I'll come back to the AI side. I think you're completely right on the events. I thought it would happen in 2024. I thought we'd have a couple drop off, but it didn't really. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I think we're going to see some struggle a bit and then make that decision. Maybe we need to pull back or move it to a different time. That said, we launched our awards in 2024. We're going to do that again in 2025. So that's not going away. But maybe there'll be, look, on the AI front, I think that's going to sit once again front and center of most events. I predict it will go from the theory to the more practical now, using a lot of examples, using what you can actually do in your business, demonstrations of what firms are actually doing and how they're utilizing AI effectively. It's still very much in the trial and error phase. And as you say, I think firms are going to start adopting that from a co-pilot perspective. I also think we're going to start to see some systems really utilize it to make a difference. We've seen the launch of Genesis in 2024. but that's not really properly gained traction. I think that might come to the forefront in 2025. We've got others in the space as well, such as Briefcase. So that whole expense management part or area, I think it's going to be up for some disruption, especially with Iris acquiring Dex at the back end of 2024. So yeah, I see some big things there. So yeah, I mean, those are some big predictions. I think on your side, John, is like, you said you're probably going to get a new laptop. I think I'm going to finally unpack these boxes that have
I've been waiting for
sat
this.
here. Yeah,
Maybe we should do that live. We should do that as a session. You'd be like, oh, here we go. Let's see what's in the top box.
The first episode of 2025 will be me unpacking. Unfortunately, one of those is a new laptop, so I might lose signal when I'm, unpacking that one and setting it up, transitioning. But I think what's my biggest prediction? I think the PE market's still going to continue. I don't think that's going to change. I think that growth's going to continue. I don't know. I think some of the PE firms, and this might already be starting to happen, and I'm just unaware of it, are going to start to struggle a bit. I think there's going to be a bit of a rejection from clients that have seen, I guess, the firm that they're engaged with up their prices and not really seen a massive change or benefit from the engagement they've had. And I just don't know if the rest of the sector has enough bandwidth to absorb those clients. So I think there's going to be a bit of a struggle for clients or firms. Now, I appreciate where we're in is a transition between where PE is basically coming in, changing it all, upping fees, and we should, over time, see the entire sector just become a bit more higher value, where we've kind of gone down to just a cost compliance model. So I do expect that to happen, but I don't think that will happen in 2025. I think it's too short term, really. What do you think,
I think it takes time, doesn't it? For I think pricing across the industry takes time to sort of change and to level out. And I think probably the only exception to that rule is really around audit. And I guess that's partly because it's still a regulated part of our sector. And typically the big four kind of lead the way in terms of how they price services, and that sort of tends to trickle down. I'm not suggesting that where they jump prices up by sort of 10% that other firms follow, but I think it does trickle down in terms of that effect. I mean, I think just picking up on that PE comment that you made, I mean, I read a really interesting thing from someone in the US market in particular, just sort of saying they're almost predicting like the demise of the small accounting firm in the US. As a consequence, partly down to the talent shortages that they've got over there, but also down to the PE money and the fact that consolidation effect's happening in the US market. I'm not so sure that we'll see the same here in the UK. I mean, we definitely don't have the same kind of talent shortages and challenges that the US have, although clearly recruitment, retention, etc., is a challenge. And I also think I'd agree with you. I think in terms of the PE activity, I think we may well see an element of a slowdown there in terms of I almost feel like we've kind of come to the boil with everything here, and now we're going to start to see what happens as people peel the layers away from the PE market and actually look at what do HG with their investment in assets need to do? What do some of the others with investments in Gravita and others now need to do in terms of their cycle? Because we know that they operate on 3 to 5 year investment cycles. We've got is it Cooper Parry coming back to the market? I can never remember the names now because it's so complicated because everyone goes around in circles with these things. But we've got a lot of stuff, a lot of activity happening, and we've talked previously, haven't we, about the fact that for a lot of these investors, their exit is going to have to be into probably into US PE money, and if that focus for US PE money is still in the US market and not on the worldwide market, then they might not have the appetite to pick up UK firms. So it's going to be really interesting. I think what we're also going to see as a consequence of this is I think we're going to see some really interesting changes in terms of talent, in terms of talent that decides to stay within the PE firms, and then talent that decides that they want to move back to independently owned firms. And those choices are varied. Some of them are very personal. Some of them are just down to feeling of independence and not being told what to do. A lot of other things. So but I think if ultimately what we end up with is better client service, that's the most important thing.
Definitely, and I think you're right. I think it's too easy to set something up in the UK for the small firms to disappear, and they can pivot and do things a lot more quickly. And I just think that that balance will still remain. I think the mid-tier side will get squeezed and kind of either get blended into larger firms or kind of break up into smaller ones, depending on what happens with the PE side. So yeah, I think there will be a lot of disruption in that space. But yeah, we talked about PE. The other side, I guess, not just acquiring firms, but it's acquiring tech, and we've seen a lot of that happen in 2024. I don't see that slowing down at all in 2025, but we did see a bit of a trend in that there wasn't much going on in the practice management space. I do wonder if these new upstarts, the Carbon, the FYI, even the Client Engager, whether we'll see a bit of, I guess, movement in that space. I know obviously there was some, was it Pixie that got acquired in 2024? Yeah. So there was obviously some movement, but I do wonder if one of those three will take the leap and be, I guess, acquired.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, I guess Carbon have got quite a lot of substantial external investment. Client engager, as you say, sort of definitely sort of feel like they're hoovering up the bottom end of the market in terms of smaller practices, and FYI, probably are pitching in against Carbon. I mean, I do wonder about where practices, probably particularly mid-sized practices, are going to invest their money in terms of technology, because I do feel like we're in a little bit of a hiatus still. I wonder if we're going to start to see accounting specific technology investments sort of slow down a little bit in 2025, maybe just as a consequence of the fact that in some respects the firms that are using the likes of CCH and Iris and Digita and Caseware and everything else are almost in some respects looking at what they're doing from a technology point of view and their roadmaps and saying, well, we're going to start to see an element of maturity and change here. But the reality is that their roadmaps indicate that 2026 is the big year for a huge leap into the cloud and being able to effectively remove probably your on-prem solutions and potentially transition to cloud if you want to stick with those vendors. And I do think as a consequence of that, a lot of firms are going to sort of sit on their hands a little bit and say, right, okay, well, there's no major imperative to change in 2025. So what we're going to do is sit and wait until 2026. What that then means, I guess, is like when you're looking at where else do you invest and what else do you do, in terms of getting your house in order in 2025, I think there's going to be a lot of work done on the infrastructure of firms and the cybersecurity and everything else in terms of like, are firms making the most of what they've got? And we saw a lot of that in 2024, but also, in terms of like the simple stuff, like the Microsoft stack or the Google stack, if you're using that, are you making the most of that? Is it all tied down? Are you working to best practices? Increasingly, particularly in our world, in the mid-tier, Cyber Essentials Plus, ISO 27001, all of these are hot topics. All of these are more and more of interest. And also our clients are coming to us and saying, what do you have in terms of these things? And a lot of these things are fairly substantial investments to get to a point where you can sort of tick the boxes and say, yes, I've got these certificates. Cyber Essentials, relatively easy. Cyber Essentials Plus, probably a 3 to 6 month project for a firm to invest in to get up to the right place in terms of things. And ISO 27001 is probably a 12-month project. So you could kind of imagine that if firms are looking at this saying, right, well, we don't really want to change too much from an accounting tech point of view in 2025 is the year to kind of go for some of these other things potentially that will set yourself straight for the future going forward.
Definitely. And I think the other aspect of this is, I guess, sorting out your house with historical information. So what we're doing with, the data we've collated over so many years, it's just been building up. We've seen some notable penalties to accounting firms, fines in 2024. And I think there's probably going to be a big breach in 2025. And that's going to really start to ring some alarm bells and probably trigger exactly what you're talking about, John.
Yeah. And I think, if you're talking about, if firms are looking at, and again, I can only speak for where we're sort of looking from a strategic point of view, but if firms are kind of saying, well, the big things are all going to happen potentially in 2026, and reality is you'll probably start planning for those in the summer of next year. from an accounting tech point of view, particularly if you want to stick with the vendors that you've already got and don't want to change things up too much, then you are going to be looking at your data, you are going to be looking at your servers and everything else, and from a document retention point of view, from a GDPR point of view, from a data protection point of view, you may well be looking at that going, right, okay, well, actually, yeah, we can't just transition from on-prem to cloud with our accounting solutions without bringing everything else along on that journey as well. So, if you're using document storage that's on the server, that you're probably going to be wanting to look at moving that as well. But you're not going to do it all at the same time. So you've got to plan for these things, and that will tie into other things. People may well have invested in servers earlier this year or the year before, and then go, right, well, that's probably got a 3 to 5 year life, so that sets the tone for where I'm going for. Others will be probably a little bit more like us, where we bought servers a couple of years ago, and so you're starting to look at that and going, well, now we're getting to that window of end of life, really, where they're starting to come to a point where you can justifiably say, well, we've spent the money, but we're if we were to get into the next cycle of renewal, this would be where we go. But the reality is cloud's going forward. And I think just to sort of tie that back to the AI thing as well, is like, if you want to invest in products like Microsoft Copilot, for example, your data's got to be in the cloud, your documentation and everything from a practice point of view has got to be in the cloud, so that it's accessible to things like Copilot. That in itself comes with its own challenges around document security. Are you going to be opening up the managing partner's salary or profit share to everyone under the sun if you open that out to Copilot without putting the right security procedures in place? So there's a whole bunch of things that from a planning point of view you've got to kind of get right.
Definitely. I mean, and I think you're right in the fact that firms' attitude to risk is shifted, and they're going back and looking at how can we tie down and mitigate more risk. Not that wasn't always at the forefront, but 2024 felt like the start of that, and we're going to move into 2025. And that links also to digital transformation work, where you've got lots of top firms that have gone, okay, well, if we've got any chance that we're going to win an audit, we don't want to be doing anything digital transformation because of the ethics regarding that and prevention for us to be able to do that work, big ticket items on the audit side. And then you've got the smaller end of the market, where you've got smaller firms seeing their clients move to more digitally focused firms, going, well, how do I cover that aspect? How do I protect myself from the risk of losing clients? And so I think there's going to be a big focus on firms thinking about, well, how do I cover the digital side? How do I make sure that we're doing the right work at a high quality? So yeah, I think there's going to be a big focus. I know, obviously, I always say about digital transformation, so probably not the biggest prediction from me, but yeah, I think there's going to be a big focus on that. And and from my side, from a personal element, I'm focusing entirely on that. I'm taking the leap. I'm diving in to create my own business to help firms in this space. So that's my big thing in 2025. Watch this space. There can be lots of chat in the first couple of weeks about the launch of the new business. But John, for you then, what are your plans for the new year? Have you got any big targets you're aiming for?
Gosh, I mean, I know that it's going to be a busy year of events again, much the same as it was this year. More international travel, which is always very much appreciated, but also incredibly draining. I mean, I've already got a conference in Mexico lined up for July. I've got a conference later in the year in Slovenia lined up as well. So, and I've also, a few holidays and a few trips and things. And actually, ironically, later today, I'm sitting down with some of the team to plan out our sort of conference season and plans for what we're going to go to, what we're going to speak at, and things like that. So, it's all go at the moment. I mean, I think for me, really, I want to expand out the services that we offer, in the same way that you're looking to do, Ryan. So digital transformation is very top of the agenda, and that's in the context, of course, as well, is that we're going to start to see some more clients drop out of the audit requirements now that that's formally been announced, and so the small company limits are going to be increased, the medium company limits are going to be increased as well, and so we're probably going to see that those clients drop out of audit unless they stick with it for voluntary reasons. And that presents more opportunity for us to do those kind of advisory services to them. And from a firm point of view, you've got to fill in the gap, because the reality is that, if you're doing an audit for a client, and even if it's a modest audit, sort of 10 or 15 grand, the reality is to drop back down into being just a standard accounts and tax compliance client, you're probably going to lose, as what, 3/4 of that income potentially, as a percentage, and so to fill that gap, you've got to do other things for those clients to make it to sort of make it worthwhile. And I'm not suggesting that you can fill that 75% gap with advisory services, but you can certainly contribute to that, and it's going to shift the pressure away from teams and departments within the larger firms that do offer audit, because you're going to start to see potentially a little bit of slack in the system that will move into other teams and departments, but also that creates opportunity for the audit team to go after the bigger ticket items. And we've still got that waterfall effect coming down from the big firms as well. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's about, we'll probably increase our headcount in our team by a couple of people, which will take us from about 6 to about 8. So that'll be exciting. More focus on data for us in terms of consultancy opportunities, and probably a move into doing a little bit of cyber consulting as well.
Nice one. Yeah, well, it sounds very busy. And I assume that 2024 was probably the most speaking events you've ever done. And I assume 2025 will beat that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping not to kind of, well, in some respects, I'm hoping not to speak as much, because no one needs to listen to me all the time. And I'm, as much as I do enjoy it, I mean, I think I had one event where I spoke 6 times in 2 days, and even for me that was a bit much. So
I agree.
Everyone was the same. We're like, Jesus Christ, get this guy off the stage. So we'll see. I mean, I'm hoping to focus more on sort of like the stuff that's really in my wheelhouse at the moment now as well, in terms of like the data IT consulting type work, and also innovation stuff. That's something I'm leading globally for our network as well. So there's a real great opportunity to talk about innovation, and actually what that means for different types of practices and different parts of the world as well, because one person's innovation is sort of just bread and butter that they've been doing for a long time. And I'm really quite excited about talking about that as a challenge for practices, but also how that ties into engaging with your staff and your people, making you a more attractive place to work at, and also turning that into an opportunity when you're dealing with clients as well. So I think there's some really interesting stuff to think about.
Yeah, it's exciting times. I think it's going to be a big year, 2025. I think there's going to be a lot going on. And yeah, I think there's going to be a big disruption as ever in the accounting tech space, hence why we have the need for the continued existence of digital disruptors. We'll be bringing things, new things again in the new year. We're hoping to formally launch the digital transformation accreditation after doing a lot of work behind the scenes throughout 2024. So yeah, we have got lots planned. And in fact, John, we probably need to sit down at some point and write it all down instead of just, winging it as we do.
Exactly. I think the other thing that we should both continue to work on is our facial hair, by the looks of it as well, Ryan, because that's
what?
Something.
This is as much as I can grow, John. This is me at peak.
I get a weird bald patch here, which really, really freaks me out.
Oh, I do that, but I get it everywhere. Hence why I can't really grow on the sides. I can never be a Santa. Well, ginger Santa, I guess, but it'd be it's more like the devil. I go for.
Yeah, you'd look good with a pitchfork, I think.
I think so, yeah. Look, I know we're now starting to kind of waffle, so let's use this as a perfect time to wrap up this week and this year's Digital Digest episodes. Hopefully this episode provided you with maybe not valuable insights, but thinking points, things to consider, deliberate on as you move into 2025. And if you're thinking about going to some shows, we always think that the main ones, Accountex, Digital Accounting Show, are it's kind of like you have to nowadays to make sure you're not missing things, you're not missing an opportunity, and that you can move your firm forward, move the needle. Please do check out the show notes for links to Digital Disruptors and anything else that we've discussed. And if you want to catch future episodes and follow us in 2025, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you're following the LinkedIn page, and make sure to check out every Thursday morning's release, apart from over the Christmas period. We'll be back in 2025. Thanks again, all. We'll see you next year.
Awesome. It was all good.
He actually said I had a number pop up on YouTube, like there was